on contrastive linguistics, where we compare and contrast Arabic and English. The first lecture will not give us particular information. This is about how we should tackle the subject in general, how we should perform. Because this is a mere introduction to contrastive linguistics for students who translate from English into Arabic and Arabic into English. And by mere introduction, we mean we are not really studying the subject. We're studying just the beginnings of that subject. We are trying to notice differences and similarities and think in a scientific manner about these things. But this introductory lecture will tell us how we are supposed to answer questions in the exam, for example, how we should read the books concerning the subject, how we deal with this subject. The first point, we can say that while this subject deals with a great deal of information, it is the manner of selecting, analyzing, and presenting the information that matters. We look at front of us here, we have one short paragraph, and when we write exactly in the same manner. This is a paragraph with indentation at the beginning. Of course, the number in red here because this is the first point. But when we are writing on a sheet of paper, we write a paragraph like that. This paragraph is made up of one sentence because we need one short paragraph on the screen. But usually we have more than one sentence per paragraph. We are saying here that we are dealing with information, but information here is not highlighted. What's highlighted is the word manner. It's the manner we select. That's point number one. Analyze and present information that matters. Now, the meaning of that is that in the age of information or the evolution of information and technology, it's not important to put pieces of information on the page. What's important is that we should select the correct pieces of information. We should organize them, and we should present them properly. The information presented does not have to be inclusive. We don't write everything that has to do with the subject. This is just an introduction to the subject, so we don't have to cover everything. You do not have to cover every point. Select a few points and present them well. Now, we move on. The information presented is so simple, and there is no requirement to really come up with something novel or rare. We have simple information concerning Arabic and English and the comparison and contrast between them. We don't bring something novel. Novel means something really new or something rare. We do this if we study for a PhD in the subject or an MA, or if we continue our study in this particular subject. But because this is a mere introduction, we need to get the information and then present it well. Later on, we discover what's really novel, new, or something rare nobody else said before. We are dealing with an introduction to a subject. The whole book is a simple introduction. It covers common knowledge that all the students who have had some experience with both English and Arabic know. Now, up to now, we say here, there is nothing new. We need the students to think about what they know about English and Arabic, and of course they've been studying English and Arabic for some time. We need them to study, to observe, to select, to show us the skills of dealing with the two languages and whether they have this kind of linguistic sense or not. They can develop this kind of sense. What's important then? It is performance. In one word, performance. How we write about the subject. What things we select and how we say them. Presentation is important, how we present the subject. Correct, simple English, and we can never forget that. Correct, simple English. Sometimes we get very much interested in the pieces of information, and then we keep pouring pieces of information, one piece after another, and we forget that we are writing English, and we are somehow experts on English and Arabic because you are studying the two languages and you're comparing, contrasting them. So how come we know the two languages well so that we can compare and contrast them and we cannot write simple, good English? So if there's something really very complicated, we don't need to say it. What we need to say is to write down our observations concerning the two languages in very simple, correct English, and once more it has to be correct and good English. We repeat this a number of times, say correct English again. This has to be really very important. Now, because some people who take this subject, they study it alone at home, they simply browse some books, look quickly here and there, and sometimes listen to lectures like this one. They do not write. And so we say 30% who fail the course over and over again, some people do that, they don't have correct English. They keep reading books, maybe, and usually not correct reading. They just look at the information on the book and they think that if they put the information on the paper, it is accepted. It is not accepted unless it is written in correct English. We need to conduct our study and performance in a common sense, simple way. Now, scientists and people interested in this subject sometimes write in a very complicated manner because they write to other scientists, to other researchers, scholars, and so on. But we are beginners, so we write things in a very simple manner, and we compare English and Arabic just like any ordinary person can do that. Of course, we leave the subject in depth to later on if we need to specialize or to major in this subject. We will notice how things are with common sense and try to compare and contrast them. We observe the data. This is learning. There is data in front of me. We select. We don't write everything. We don't read everything. We select. It shows that we have intelligence to know what's important, what's less important, what's relevant, what's irrelevant. We choose the relevant matter, or the items that have to do with our subject. We compare. That's to say we find similarities. And we contrast. That's to say we find differences, and this is important. Our subject is called contrastive linguistics, but it covers also a part of the comparative linguistics. We compare things which are alike, we contrast things which are not alike. So we compare and we contrast, we find similarities and differences. And then we express this in a clear, correct manner. What about data? Some people think knowledge is simply data, and that's not true. The computer is full of data, but the computer does not have wisdom and knowledge. Of course, some computers do actually have expert systems and they look very intelligent. But we cannot say that computers by themselves or hard disks or books, files are intelligent because they have data. Data is the raw material. If we can't use it well, it's completely nonsensical. We don't need just data. Pieces of information thrown on a sheet of paper. The Arabic and English we read and write, this is the data we study. We are not studying something that's far away from us. We just sit at home, read newspapers in Arabic and English, compare them. Take a sentence of Arabic, a sentence of English, compare and contrast them. This is our material. The Arabic and English we hear and speak. Spoken English and written English. Spoken Arabic and written Arabic. We are going to focus our attention on samples of Arabic and English, and we see the differences, just like any person, not simply the researcher or the scientist. What's contrastive linguistics? Now, if we are writing an essay on that subject, we divide this essay into elements, into points, into paragraphs. We need to talk about contrastive linguistics and the relation to general linguistics. If we are writing an essay, we divide it like this. And I will talk about this in details after a minute. If I need to talk about contrastive linguistics, I first say what general linguistics is, because contrastive linguistics is an application of general linguistics. Then we need to make a comparison. We say, what's comparison? For example, in comparative linguistics, we compare languages which are alike. We compare French to Italian. We compare Arabic to Hebrew. We compare Italian to Spanish. We compare things which are alike. And we'll say more about this in a minute. If we're writing an essay on contrastive linguistics, we mention this idea, the comparison of comparative linguistics and languages which are alike. Now we give examples and details. If this is an essay, we write it this way. Then we talk about the objectives and commentary. What we see in front of us here, what is contrastive linguistics? This is an attempt to write an outline of an essay. The outline has paragraph 1. What is comparative linguistics? We have to say it is applied linguistics. First, there's general linguistics. This studies phonology, the science of sounds, studies vocabulary, studies morphology, etc. But then when you apply this, we call it comparative linguistics. But in another paragraph, comparative linguistics studies languages which are alike, like French and Italian. Then we give examples of languages which are alike, and we can compare French to Italian, English to German. This is, of course, a very general idea and the background. Then we talk about the objectives of contrastive linguistics. Why do we do that? Objectives here is the aims. Why we study that? We study that because we are translators and we need to see the differences and similarities, so when we do translation we don't make mistakes and we know how to handle ourselves. Now, to talk about this in more details, we take one element we mentioned before very quickly, which is general linguistics. If we write an essay on that, we say, what is general linguistics? Definition. General linguistics, if we need to say more here in the dotted part, we talk about what general linguistics is. This is where we study language in a scientific way. Now, let's come to some points to practice. But before we say this, we say what we said today. We didn't say anything about the material we're studying itself. We talked about the manner of presenting this material. So let's see something very general. What's contrastive linguistics? This is a question we need to answer. We answer this first question by reading the book. I didn't talk about this, of course, today. I just give a few hints about what we study here, about contrastive linguistics as an applied study of general linguistics. General linguistics being the scientific study of language, which is divided into phonology, morphology, syntax, etc. Contrastive linguistics uses the information and the knowledge we get from general linguistics in an applied manner where we contrast two languages coming from two different origins, like, for example, English and Arabic. Students need to study this idea as an introduction to the course. They need to study this in the book, at least one chapter. If they can read more, that's fine, that's great. Now, who should study it and why? Now, those who study contrastive linguistics, like the subject we're studying, like studying Arabic and English at the same time, comparing and contrasting them, can use this for two main purposes. One of them is the one we have, our purpose of studying this subject, which is translation. Translating from English into Arabic or Arabic into English, the translation between these two languages needs some kind of knowledge of the two languages themselves and how we compare and contrast their structures and phonology, etc. So who needs this kind of study? For us, it is the translator, and also for teaching. If we teach English to people coming from a background speaking Arabic, or if we teach Arabic to people coming from a background speaking English. So also teachers need that. Explain the meanings of the following terms: phonology, morphology, and syntax. We need to do this in preparation for what we're going to do next time, which will be our first lecture proper. The first element we are going to study in details. We need these because we will study the phonology of the two languages, or actually we are not going to study them, but we are going to refer to the two phonologies, the phonology of English and Arabic. And we are going to remember things we studied before when we studied the phonology of English. Phonology being the study of the sounds of a language. And phonology will also tell us about the grammar of the sounds, how they work together, the rules of these language sounds occurring together. Generally speaking, it's about the sounds, which are the consonants, the vowels, and continuous speech. Morphology studies the structure of words and meaningful parts of words. We have a whole chapter on that. We are not answering the question now. If we need an answer, we have a very long chapter on morphology in our book. But before we start reading any part in the book, we need to know what phonology is, at least as a term, studying the sounds of the language, as consonants, vowels, and stress, and so on. Morphology, studying the words and parts of words. And syntax, studying the grammar of the language. Write a short essay on contrastive linguistics. If we need to write an essay like that, we'll use a plan like the one we mentioned before. We have paragraphs, and then we start with a paragraph saying what contrastive linguistics is in general, or how it depends on a general science called general linguistics, being itself a mere applied science, and then how it compares and contrasts to languages, etc. Just let's have an idea about that. We may not be interested in writing an essay on contrastive linguistics in a theoretical manner. We need simply to know what this thing is in general, and then study the chapters of the book, and then at the end we can say what it is exactly. So, general idea when we contrast two languages of two different origins, two different structures, etc. What's more important in this course, content or form? Usually we have this problem with the students starting to learn a foreign language, and when they are asked to write an essay in a general sense, like in the essay course, or an essay on the phonology of English and Arabic in a particular subject like our subject, they think that it is content that matters and form doesn't matter. And we can say that we need form that's really brilliant and content that's not worthwhile. We can't say that. We need both, content and form. And if the content in the minds of some people is really very good, while the form is really very bad, we still have got something right because there is content. We say about language, language does not work in this manner. If the form of the language is faulty, is bad, there is no content. The content of the language is understood through the form. Content here means the information. If we say the pieces of information are correct, but the language is incorrect, this doesn't work here. We will have to say that the form has to be right so that the content will be right. But if we look at our particular course, we are more interested in form, meaning that interested in writing good English, organizing the ideas properly, comparing and contrasting in the logical manner, and so on, not the amount of information. So if people study books and books on contrastive linguistics without being able to express themselves in good English, their effort goes to nothing. We need to know how to do this in good form. Is there really a great difference? If we think about language